Okay, get this. Ready for this? What if um what if a judge used footnotes to accuse another judge of like misconduct?
Wild, right?
It's definitely not your typical legal drama.
No.
Raises a lot of questions, about judges, about how they're supposed to act, ethics, all that.
Yeah, yeah.
And the whole like power dynamic, in the court system. Who
Hmm.
has the power to say what and like when and where and all that.
Exactly. So let's break down this whole case. It's officially Intia v. Ferrer, case number AM no, RTJ 24-064. Decided May 13th, 2024. Okay, so it all starts with Judge Intia. He's writing a court order, official thing, and he uses these footnotes
The notes.
to accuse his colleague, Executive Judge Ferrer, of all this bad stuff.
And we're not talking like, oh, you took my parking spot kind of bad stuff. This is serious.
Oh yeah, this is not like office politics.
No, no, no.
This is Judge Intia saying that Judge Ferrer, the other judge, is doing all these shady things.
Like what? Give us the dirt. Okay, so he's saying that Executive Judge Ferrer is, first of all, bad-mouthing him, Judge Indicia, to lawyers.
Oh, juicy.
Yeah. Then he says that Ferrer's running a whole insurance business.
On the side.
On the side. Like while he's a judge.
That doesn't sound good.
Doesn't sound very ethical, right?
No, no, no.
And then, get this, he's also saying that Ferrer's delaying cases on purpose. Cases involving people who are already in jail.
Whoa, hold on. Intentionally, like messing with people's freedom.
That's the accusation.
That's heavy stuff.
Yeah, and it gets even bolder because
Bolder. How?
Judge Inticia, he's not just talking, he's like putting his money where his mouth is. He gives evidence.
Evidence? Like what?
Yeah. He gives a lease contract for this supposed insurance business. And then he has a list of cases that he says Ferrer delayed on purpose.
So he's not messing around. He came prepared.
He came prepared. He's got like receipts. You know what I mean?
I see what you're saying. So he's not just throwing out random accusations. He's trying to build a case.
Exactly. And he's using a very public way to do it.
Public. Yeah, I mean, it's all in court documents, right?
Right. So everyone sees it.
That's a power move.
It is. Now, we got to remember at this point, these are just accusations, right?
Right, right. Allegations. Judge Ferrer gets his chance to speak, to defend himself.
Exactly. And so what does he say? How does he respond to all this?
He doesn't hold back, I'll tell you that.
Oh, this is good.
He denies everything. Well, almost everything. So about instigating the lawyer. He denies that. Says the whole thing came up naturally, like genuine concerns about Judge Intia, he says. Then the insurance business. He admits to that, but he says it's a family thing, inherited it, someone else manages it, far away from his court.
So, like, hands off.
Exactly. And he's careful to point out that he declared it, on his financial stuff, like being transparent.
So no hiding it.
Yes, no hiding up front about it. Then the delayed cases. Oh, he completely shuts that down. Says his records are perfect, all backed up. Official audit, no delays, intentional or otherwise.
So he's basically saying, look, I've got proof I'm doing everything by the book.
That's it. He's countering everything, point by point. His own evidence, his own story, totally different from Judge Inchinola's.
So we've got a, like, he said, she said situation.
Exactly. Two judges, both with power, both saying the other one's wrong.
And this is all happening publicly, right? In court documents and stuff.
Oh, yeah. Can't get more public than that. Starts to make you wonder, like, what's going on behind the scenes,
Yeah, it makes you question, like, the whole system, right? If judges are doing this, what does it say about the courts?
Big questions, for sure. And it's not something they could just ignore, right? This is serious stuff.
So what happened next? Who steps in to sort this whole mess out?
Well, this case, it gets so much attention, it goes all the way up to the Judicial Integrity Board. They call it the GIB.
The GIB, like the referees of the court system, making sure everyone plays fair.
That's a good way to put it. They investigate complaints, make sure judges are ethical, all that. So they stepped in, they got to figure out who's telling the truth, right?
Okay, so the GIB gets involved.
Right.
What do they decide? Who do they believe? Judge Intia or Judge Ferrer?
Well, it's not so simple. They don't completely side with either one.
Oh, a split decision. Now we're talking. Tell me more.
They go through everything, all the evidence, very carefully, and they say there's no proof that Judge Ferrer messed with the lawyer or delayed those cases, so those accusations out the window.
So Judge Intia's claims, not looking so good now.
Nope. but there's a twist.
The twist. Ooh, I love twists.
The JIB, they find Judge Ferrer guilty of owning that insurance business.
Wait, really? But he said he wasn't running it and that he declared it?
Doesn't matter. JIB says it's a violation. Administrative Circular number 5. That's the rule. Judges can't do certain businesses on the side, even if it's family, even if it's far away.
So even though he wasn't, like, actively managing it, still a no-go.
That's what the GIB says. They say judges, they got to be held to a higher standard. Can't even look like there's a conflict of interest. You know what I mean? Public trust and all that.
Makes sense. Perception matters, especially when we're talking about the law, right? So what happens next? Is this the end of the story?
Not even close. The JIB, they make recommendations, and it all goes to the top. The Supreme Court of the Philippines, they get the final say on what happens to Judge Ferrer.
Okay, so the Supreme Court steps in. What's their verdict? Do they agree with the JIB?
Mostly. They go through everything, all the evidence, all the arguments, and guess what? They throw out those charges about outbursts and mistreating staff and influencing the lawyer. They say there's just not enough proof.
So basically they're saying Judge Amplia's claims don't hold up.
Yep. And they also back up the JIB on the delayed cases. They say the official records, the audits, that's what matters, not just some list. So they side with Judge Ferrer. No intentional delays, they say.
Wow, so Judge Amplia not having a good time with these accusations.
Yep, but there's another twist.
Another one. This is like a legal thriller.
Right. Okay, so the Supreme Court, they mostly agree with the JIB, but they also uphold that guilty verdict on the insurance business.
No way. So even though he wasn't running it, declared it, still a violation.
Still a violation. And they don't let him off easy. They fine him PHP $35,000, comes out of his retirement.
Ooh, that's gotta hurt.
Right. They cite the violation, Administrative Circular number 5, and point to the rules of court. Those have the penalties all spelled out.
So the Supreme Court's sending a message like, judges, you gotta follow the rules, even the small ones.
Exactly. They're saying judges are held to a higher standard. Actions, business, everything gotta be above board. Public trust, remember?
I see. So it's not just about what they do in the courtroom, it's about how they act outside too.
That's it. Gotta avoid even the appearance of a conflict. Their personal life, professional life, it's all connected, right? Any conflict could make people doubt their fairness.
This whole thing is, like, mind-blowing. So for us regular folks, what can we learn from this whole saga? Why should we care about what these judges are doing?
Good question. This case, it gives us a peek behind the curtain, you know? Shows us how the whole Philippine judicial system works, how they hold judges accountable. There's a process, there are rules.
Like a system of checks and balances.
Exactly. And it shows that nobody's above the law, not even judges.
And it all came out because Judge Anarchia spoke up.
Right.
Even if it was through footnotes.
Right, right. Makes you think, like, what if he hadn't done that? Would anyone have known about the insurance business?
That's a good point. Maybe there are other things happening that we don't know about, you know?
It's possible, right? Makes you wonder, are there better ways to do this? To make things more transparent?
Yeah, so maybe this case isn't just about these two judges. Maybe it's about something bigger.
I think so. It's about how the whole system works, how we make sure we can trust the people upholding the law.
Big stuff, man. Big stuff.
Definitely food for thought, right?
It is. Yeah. So we've covered a lot of ground here. The accusations, the JIB, the Supreme Court.
A whole legal roller coaster ride.
It is. So what happens next? What's the final chapter in this whole story?
Well, we're about to find out, right?
Right. Stay tuned, folks, because this is about to get even more interesting. This whole case, it really makes you think, like about the legal system, all the people involved, judges, lawyers, everyone.
Yeah, definitely not black and white, you know? It's like all these gray areas, trying to figure out what's right, what's wrong.
And remember, these are judges we're talking about.
Yeah.
The people who are supposed to be like the most impartial, the most ethical.
Exactly. They're the ones upholding the law, setting the example. So when something like this happens, it raises a lot of questions.
Big questions. Like, how do we make sure judges are accountable? How do we balance their power with the need for, like, checks and balances?
And how do we protect the public's trust in the system? Because if people lose faith in the courts, then what do we have left?
Right. It's like the foundation of our society starts to crumble. So this case, it's not just about these two judges. It's about something much bigger.
It's about the system itself and how we ensure that it works fairly and justly for everyone, not just the powerful or the privileged.
Deep stuff, man. Deep stuff. Okay, so we left off with the Supreme Court stepping in to make the final call on Judge Ferrer. What happens next?
All right, so the Supreme Court, They take their time, they review everything, the GIB's findings, the evidence from both judges, all the legal arguments, and in the end, they issue their decision.
Into the
What's the verdict? Drum roll, please. They uphold the GIB's decision on the insurance business. Judge Ferrer is officially guilty of violating Administrative Circular Number 5.
No way. So even though he wasn't actively involved, didn't hide it, still a violation.
Still a violation. The Supreme Court, they say it doesn't matter if he was hands-off or if it was a family business. The fact that he owned it, that's the problem.
So they're basically saying, judges, you can't even have the appearance of a conflict of interest.
Exactly. They're held to a higher standard. There's actions, their business dealings. Everything has to be squeaky clean. No room for doubt.
That's a tough standard. But I guess it makes sense, right? We need to be able to trust that judges are impartial, that their decisions aren't influenced by anything other than the law.
That's the idea. It's about maintaining public confidence in the judiciary, because without that trust, the whole system starts to break down.
So what was the penalty? What happened to Judge Ferrer after the Supreme Court ruling?
Well, they didn't throw him in jail or anything, but they did hit him where it hurts, his wallet. They fined him PHP $35,000.
Ooh, that's a hefty chunk of change.
Yeah, and it gets deducted from his retirement benefits. So basically they're saying, you messed up, now you got to pay for it.
So Supreme Court, they're not playing around. They're sending a message to all judges. Follow the rules,
Yeah.
or there will be consequences.
Loud and clear message. And it's not just about following the letter of the law, it's about the spirit of the law. Judges have to be above reproach. Their conduct, their ethics, everything has to be beyond question.
This whole case is like a crash course in judicial ethics, huh?
It is. And it's a reminder that the legal system, it's not just about laws and procedures, it's about people. People with flaws, with biases, with personal lives that can sometimes intersect with their professional duties.
Yeah, it's messy, it's complicated, but it's also fascinating.
Absolutely. And this case, Intia v. Ferrer, it's a perfect example of that complexity. It's a case that will be studied and debated for years to come.
No doubt about it. So what do you think, where do we go from here? What are the big takeaways from this whole saga? What should we be thinking about, talking about?
Well, for me, the biggest takeaway is the importance of transparency and accountability in the judiciary. We need mechanisms to ensure that judges are held to the highest ethical standards and that any potential conflicts of interest are addressed swiftly and decisively.
Right. Like we can't just assume everything's fine and dandy just because someone's wearing a robe and sitting on a bench. Sure.
Exactly. We need systems in place, checks and balances to make sure the system is working as intended. And that includes having open and honest conversations about these issues, even when they're uncomfortable.
So in this case, it's like a wake-up call, a reminder that we can't just take the legal system for granted.
I think so. It's a reminder that the pursuit of justice is an ongoing process, something that requires constant vigilance, adaptation, and a commitment to upholding the highest ethical standards. And that's something we should all be invested in, not just judges and lawyers.
It's a reminder that the law affects all of us every single day, and that we have a responsibility to engage with it, to understand it, and to demand that it be applied fairly and justly. This whole thing, it really makes you think, about like the whole idea of justice, what it means, how it works.
Yeah, for sure. It's like a glimpse into this world that most people don't really see, the inner workings of the legal system, all the complexities.
And it shows that, even judges, they're not perfect, they're human, they make mistakes.
Yeah, and it highlights the need for like constant reflection. How do we make the system better? How do we make sure it's fair, that it works for everyone?
Big questions, right? And this case, it's a reminder that we can't just sit back and assume that everything's going to be all right. We got to stay engaged. We got to keep asking questions.
Definitely. We can't take the legal system for granted. It's something we all need to be involved in to make sure it serves its purpose.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this this deep dive into Intia v. Ferrer, what are your final thoughts? What really stands out to you from this whole case?
That's a good question. I think for me, it's the reminder that even in a system that's supposed to be objective, like the law, there's still a human element, personal conflicts, ambitions, different interpretations of the rules. It all plays a role.
Yeah, it's not just about black and white, right and wrong. It's about all those gray areas in between.
Exactly. And in this case, it shows how those gray areas can have a real impact on people's lives, on the system itself.
Yeah, it's a reminder that the pursuit of justice, it's not a destination, it's a journey, right? It's something we have to constantly strive for.
I like that, a journey. Because it's ongoing, it's never finished. There's always room for improvement, for growth, for change.
Well said.
Well, folks, that wraps up our deep dive into Intia v. Ferrer. We hope you found it as interesting, as eye-opening as we did.
And as always, we encourage you to keep learning, keep exploring. We'll be posting links to the court decision, some other resources on our website. Check it out. Form your own opinions. Let us know what you think.
And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on our next deep dive. We're always on the lookout for fascinating legal cases, thought-provoking topics, all that good stuff.
Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and keep those legal minds sharp.